Can we thank the Wilson family for leading us this morning? So well done. I believe it's your first time leading worship, and you guys have just been so wonderful today. So thank you to all of you. Good morning, church. Been quite a week here locally, as we're well aware of the fires in California, and particularly one that was here in Calimesa. And as was said in the prayer, we're grateful to the first responders, grateful to the Red Cross, grateful to Mesa Grande. Alfred, thank you for being a center for the Red Cross to serve the victims. And just a reminder of how much we love and care for this community and how many wonderful people are in this community. And we continue to pray for the victims from these fires who have lost homes and property and livelihood. So we lift them up. But at the same time, of course, we know there's so much to be grateful for. The beautiful fall weather, a church family, and the assurance that none of us here are ever alone. How grateful we are for that. It was late March of 2011, my last spring break of college. And as you likely know, college students are known for really celebrating spring break in style, especially when it's your senior year. Of course, I was no exception. I was flying to a tropical island with a good friend of mine where we would meet new people, wear crazy outfits, and do a lot of dancing. The tropical island was called Roatan, the friend, Michael Jong, the new people, the Calimesa SDA Church. And the VBS would be putting on at the church had plenty of crazy outfits and dancing. It was as wild a spring break as there ever was. But it almost didn't happen. On the way there, we had a layover in Houston, and my ears hurt terribly on the descent. And so I asked Michael's dad, Dr. Dan Jong, for advice on that, and he told me to go buy some nasal spray. And so I went to the shop in the airport and began looking at t-shirts and books and Hollywood magazines. And then I bought my medicine. And when I went back to the gate, it was completely empty. The only thing there was my backpack. I had completely mistimed the layover. I grabbed my backpack, I sprinted to the door. An understandably angry flight attendant said, "Sir, we were about to leave without you." I felt sorry, but I was also relieved. Whew, I had made it. But then came the worst part, the walk of shame. You see, I had never been to the Calimesa SDA Church before. I was their guest. Specifically, I was a guest of the Jongs who had invited me to come on this amazing opportunity. And now I had held up the entire flight for my $7 nasal spray. It was a good thing that I didn't buy snacks and magazines. Imagine how that would have looked as I walked down the aisle. And so I started to shuffle down towards my seat, wanting to cover my face like I'd just been arrested. When I got to the seat, my good friend Michael had his face in his hands. He said, "What is wrong with you?" And then Dan and Sarah, well, they were as kind as ever. I don't think they have an angry bone in their body, though they certainly deserved to that day. I wasn't feeling very good about how the trip started, but we ended up actually having quite a fabulous time on that mission trip. And while I'm sure as that moment unfolded, some of you who were on that flight were thinking, okay, who invited this kid? You all turned out to be disturbingly pleasant and very forgiving. Have you ever thought about how much of life is about timing? We have good things happen in our lives, and we have bad things happen in our lives. And so many of them are good or bad because of their timing. And we like to think that the timing is under our control. But in reality, most of the time, that's not the case. We learn as life goes on that timing is much less something we make happen and much more often something that happens to us, leaving us to respond. Following the Roatan trip, I began my last quarter of college with no job lined up. Apparently, there wasn't a huge market for journalism majors wanting to become pastors. Week 1 went by of spring quarter. Week 2, week 3, week 4, nothing. I had to actually wonder whether buying my cap and gown for graduation was a wise use of my limited funds. I had tried creating good timing, but ended up only waiting. And then I walked into my dorm room after class one day, and I had an email from a pastor in Oceanside asking if I wanted to become his youth pastor. Hallelujah. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to San Diego to interview, and 2 days later, the Southeastern California Conference took a chance on that journalism major with the bad sinuses. Timing. I'm comforted by the fact that Jesus too had his struggles with timing. As a child, he had to reconcile his natural adolescent growth with his supernatural calling. During his 20s, he stayed at home and worked in the family business while waiting for the launching moment of his ministry. And once that moment arrived, he had to continually deflect opportunities to fulfill his mission more quickly, telling people again and again, "My time has not yet come. My time has not yet come." And when that didn't really help, as it usually didn't, Jesus himself had to resort to hiding, to running away, and sometimes if you read the text, it sounds like he just flat out vanishes. Timing. And so, how are you doing at creating good timing in your life? I think a better question for us all is, how are we at receiving the timing that life has been giving us, and responding, and waiting, and trusting, and knowing that our own lack of control may actually sometimes be the very best thing for us? Personally, I think I've had trouble giving up that control. But I'd like to share with you this morning how being here at Calimesa has helped me to learn that very lesson. It started from day one. Even before, actually, when Pastor John called me about potentially coming here, I told him flat out, it's not good timing. I was in year 5 at Oceanside, totally happy, and in the middle of teaching 8th grade for a school year. And I wasn't going to leave in the middle of the school year, so sorry, bad timing. But I couldn't create my own timing after all. And I did end up coming here before the school year was over, as difficult as that was. But can I tell you, I'm so happy I did. And then the first Sabbath came. And I had a lot going on. I was preaching my first sermon here. I was teaching my first lesson to my new group of youth. And we all know the most intimidating group of people in the world is a pack of teenagers. I was driving later that afternoon to San Diego to baptize somebody in the ocean at high tide. Bad timing. And on top of all that, I was still recovering from the affectionate roasting I had received at Pine Springs Ranch the weekend before. And add to that, I had been invited by one of the new youth moms to join her family for Sabbath lunch, meaning that even after this service was over, I would still have to play pastor and make a good impression. And I wasn't sure how that would go because, well, frankly, this married couple was interesting. You see, from what I could tell, the mom, the one who had invited me, she was friendly, really friendly. And the dad was quiet, really quiet. And I didn't really see how that worked, but I had their daughter in my youth group, and so I thought, I just got to make the best of this. Thankfully, I found out there would be another family joining for lunch, so hopefully I could get in, I could get out, I could drive down to San Diego. That would be good timing. Well, after preaching the 2 services here and meeting many of you, I was the last one to arrive for lunch. I was warmly greeted, offered a seat, given a plate of food, all by the mom, but the dad nodded at me once. That was nice. In my best Sabbath voice, I then went around and said hi to the other family, said hey to the daughter in my youth group. I said thank you to the parents who had invited me. And then I got really confused. Apparently, there was another daughter in this family, an older sister. And she looked straight out of a movie or one of those Hollywood magazines I had seen in the Houston airport. And so I momentarily lost my Sabbath voice and I said something like, Well, then my internal voice spoke up. It said, hey, get it together, Rennacker. You are working right now, Pastor. And so I gathered myself, and the meal went on. But I knew I recognized her from somewhere. My dreams, just kidding. She had once asked me to speak for something, and we had been Facebook friends ever since. This was Paige Matsuda. I had to ask, did you once invite me to speak at an event at your school? World's best pickup line. She said, yeah, and you said no. This was going very well. Sure enough, 5 years earlier, Paige had sent me this. Hi, Aren. My name is Paige Matsuda. I'm a junior, and I am religious vice president at Reading Adventist Academy. I understand that you spoke at PUC's publication workshop, and from what I heard, you were very good. Smiley face. So to get to my point, I was wondering if you would like to come to Reading and give our spring week of prayer. We don't have a set week because we are open to any dates that you are free. Thank you for your time and looking forward to hearing back from you. God bless, Paige Matsuda. Well, as a highly sought-after speaker, I explained to young Paige that I was now pastoring down in San Diego, a good 9 hours from Reading. And my schedule just wouldn't allow for that. So sorry. Bad timing. Then I got this message. Oh, no worries. I understand how life can be busy sometimes. And no, I had no idea. That's really awesome that you're pastoring down south. Well, thank you so much for your prayers. But before you officially say no, just hear me out. Ha. RAA is a great school, but sadly it's very small, 27 in the high school, and our future doesn't look very bright. Without going into a lot of detail, the high school will most likely, unless a miracle happens, close next year. So our spring week of prayer really means a lot to me because I really want to end the year strong, you know? Anyway, our school would do anything to have you come. Seriously, we would pay for everything. Just consider it. Thanks again. I never responded. Fast forward 5 years, and we are sitting in her living room with a great icebreaker. Paige later shared that she was at La Sierra studying philosophy and religion, and so I recommended a book to her, When Breath Becomes Air, a recent bestseller that I thought she might enjoy. The next day, I took it a step further. I went to Barnes & Noble, and I bought it for her myself, gave it to her sister Annie at school, saying, hey, could you just give this to Paige, maybe? The next time I saw Paige, she gave it back to me, which is why I have the book that I gave her. It says right here, Paige, no obligation to read, comma, thought you might enjoy. Aren. Guess not. But the reason she gave it back was that she had actually gone out and bought the book for herself, based upon my recommendation. And so we got together at Queen Bean in Yucaipa to talk about it, and a friendship was born. After that, we would see each other once a week at La Sierra, since I was also studying there, and a friendship grew into feelings. Started coming by the Matsuda's house just a little more often to connect with Annie, because she was in my youth group, of course. Thankfully, she totally understood. And as we spent more time together, we tried to do so, somewhat privately to get to know each other. Problem was, we weren't very good at it. Actually, the problem was I wasn't very good at it. One time, a note from Paige slipped out of my pocket at the Wilsons' house, the other Wilsons. And Rhonda called me. She says, "I think you left something here. It has hearts on it." I said, Rhonda, Rob and I are very close. Another time, we were spending Sabbath afternoon at the Jong's home, and Pastor Isaac's family decided to show up. And on the way home, Christian asked Pastor Isaac, "Daddy, why was Pastor Aren there?" "Well, son, Pastor Aren lives there." "Daddy, why was Paige there?" "Well, son, good question." Eventually, after a long dating period that required me getting over some serious commitment issues and Paige patiently withstanding them, I decided to ask her out. I showed up to her house at 6 a.m. one morning and took her to watch the sunrise on a new day and a new relationship. We then went out for breakfast in our pajamas, and all was well. Until I was reminded of one of the best parts about being in a relationship. As I'm sure you all know, that when you're in a relationship, whether with a partner, a spouse, in a relationship with a sibling, with a parent, with a coworker, with a neighbor, with a friend, any relationship, it has a way of bringing some of those weaknesses we have that we like to just kind of stuff into a corner, hoping nobody will know that it's there. Yeah, of bringing that to the surface. Of reminding us that maybe we're not as perfect as we like to think we are. And that it's time to humble ourselves and grow. But there were a lot of days I didn't want that growth. There are a lot of days I still don't. And so I was reminded that relationships are hard, that whole selflessness thing isn't easy. But when you believe in something, it's worth it. And I started to realize that contrary to what I had been told or seen growing up, falling in love was not about creating perfection with somebody. Rather, that falling in love was about choosing the imperfection with somebody. And I knew I wanted that with Paige. And so while we had so many good times together, trips and birthdays and holidays, I got to see her graduate. She got to see me play Jesus twice. But we also knew that we needed counseling. And while it made for challenging conversations, it was the best thing that we could have done. And as much as we respect the wisdom and advice of pastors, we wanted counseling from a licensed professional therapist. I'm so glad we did. We're still in counseling, learning the imperfection together. 2 months ago, I teamed up with the Hoffers to plan my proposal to Paige. I had printed off 173 pictures that went from birth to that very month. And church, I am so sorry if you needed ink in the printer that week here. I took her out to dinner while the Hoffers did what only the Hoffers can do, and they perfectly prepared the backyard for the surprise. And Paige and I walked through our story, talking about memories. You remember this picture? Look at this moment. And shedding some tears. And then I got on one knee and I popped the question. And Paige and I stepped into the next chapter of planning our lives together. The girl who grew up in these very pews, and the guy who never thought he'd be here. From an innocent Sabbath lunch to this. From saying, I can't go, to being so glad I did. From the worst timing to the best timing. I'm reminded of the wisdom literature of Ecclesiastes. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Back in March, Paige received an email from Claremont School of Theology informing her that she had been selected to receive their President's Scholarship. It's given to 2 applicants of the many at Claremont School of Theology, and it comes with full tuition covered for all of graduate school. We were ecstatic, of course. Claremont was Paige's dream school for her to pursue becoming a professor, and now it was free, or so we thought. There was one cost that came with it. Reports said after 62 years in Claremont that the School of Theology was moving to Salem, Oregon. And so how about that timing? Paige spoke with the school and was told that she could do her first year of grad school down here. Yes. But that she would need to do her second year in Oregon. Well, of course, Paige was my priority. And if Paige was going to Salem next year, we would be going to Salem next year, as much as I love Calimesa. But the timing was actually interesting for me as well. You see, I was approaching my 30th birthday, and I'd been doing some reflecting on my years in ministry. I realized that I'd been speaking to youth for nearly a decade, and yet I continued to see those same youth make harmful mistakes, enter into painful relationships, and place themselves in avoidable circumstances far too often. And I had hardly prepared them to navigate those things at all. And so I felt like I'd been speaking to what my teenage experience might have been like 15 years ago, but not speaking to how they can be healthy teenagers today. I felt like I had been failing as a youth pastor. And now I was confronted with the possibility that it was my last year. And so I wanted to make up for lost time, and I made relevancy the number one focus of my ministry. I had to step into the world of today's youth and meet them where they are at, which meant I had to first discover who they were. As you likely know, each American generation since the 1900s has been named and explained, which means that all of us here belong to a specific generation. It's pretty cool. Maybe you know the one that you belong to. Maybe you don't. The first one is for those born between 1900 and 1927. Do you know who they are or what we call them? They are the greatest generation. They came of age during the Great Depression, and they spent their primes fighting or serving in World War II. Tom Brokaw gave them this name in his 1998 book, where he wrote, "It wasn't for fame or recognition they served, but simply because it was the right thing to do." Out of such circumstances arose a generation of people who were known for their ability to survive and solve problems while maintaining their integrity. Those born between 1928 and 1945, well, they are known as the silent generation. The financial insecurity and war that burdened their parents led to them having fewer children, making this generation the only generation that is smaller than the one that precedes it. They're also known as the silent generation because they were young adults during the McCarthy era, where accusations of treason were rampant. So they developed a fear of speaking out and chose to focus on their careers over activism. And yet, this is the generation that had many of the leaders during the civil rights movement. And so there actually is quite a lot to say about the silent generation. Those born between 1946 and 1964, okay, we all know this one. The baby boomers. Boomers are known for being proud of being boomers. I searched baby boomers on Google. I found this picture, and I just thought, isn't that perfect? I mean, look at them. They look like they're all laughing at us. The origin of the name is well known. These years saw a huge spike in the population due to the increase in new families following the war. From that came a distinct identity amongst this group of newborns that has carried them for life. Boomers contrasted the silent generation before them by being outspoken and bringing cultural, political, and economic revolution and carrying a constant optimism for what life could offer. Most boomers are now in their 60s and older, but when they were younger, they were the ones moving the culture forward and seeking to differ themselves from their parents' more traditional ideals. Those born between 1965 and 1980, they are Generation X. Now, due to higher rates of divorce and mothers joining the workforce, Gen Xers became known as the latchkey kids because they would be dropped off by the bus or walk home from school or whatever it was with their house key around their neck so they could let themselves in. Some say this created a sense of apathy, but more than that, it created a spirit of independence. Generation X is the generation of tech startups and small businesses. They are now known for their ambition and spirit of entrepreneurship that literally changed the world. Think Google, Amazon, YouTube. But they did not need the limelight or praise for doing so like others. Those born between 1981 and 1996, millennials. Now, millennials have taken plenty of criticism. They're too detached, they're too self-absorbed, they're too handsome. No, just kidding. But millennials are a generation, in actuality, that are known for being creative. They're known for being compassionate. They're known for being socially conscious. Some may say we're addicted to lattes, but we say we're just so driven we need the extra energy. Some might say we still live with our moms. We say we're just committed to our parents. Some say we're smothered in student loan debt, and they are right. That is totally true. But it's because we're the most educated generation we've ever seen, which includes our women, which is something to be proud of. And so millennials, like previous generations, have broken their own molds and improved our world, particularly in diversity and acceptance. Finally, those born from 1997 to, we're not sure yet, Generation Z. This unique generation that we are learning how to love and serve. And so what are Gen Zers like? Well, according to research by Barna and many others, we know a few things, though we're still learning plenty more. We know that this generation, of course, is inundated with technology. They are technological natives, which means that they actually thirst for personal connection. They are born into an anxious world of recessions and violence, so they deeply need to feel safe. They are observing division and dishonesty from those above them, so they crave integrity and acceptance. And they've been made to be isolated, and so they desire the warmth of family. It's my dream that the place that they could find all of these things would be the church. Could you imagine that? And I feel called to help make that happen. And so while my timing for more relevant ministry has not been great, my hope is that it's better late than never. And becoming passionate about serving our newest generation and helping them feel as if church is a place for them has actually given me this new excitement for ministry. And I got to tell you, feeling that in year 9 and entering a new decade of life is pretty awesome. But it's hard when you think it might also be over soon. I wanted to keep doing youth ministry, especially in this conference, the only conference I've known and which I've loved working in. And so I thought if only I could travel around to churches to train and mentor and inspire and cast a vision for what church ministry could look like moving forward. And then Sandy called me. And she told me that my name had been brought up by a few people to be the new youth director of this conference. I said, well, Sandy, what does that mean? What would I be doing? She said, well, Aren, you'd be mentoring, training, inspiring, and vision casting for what youth ministry could look like going forward. Well, I told her that sounds nice, but I'm most likely going to move to Oregon next summer for 1 year. And she said something that I'll never forget. She said, Aren, We don't want to lose you in this conference. We think we can make it work. Timing. But then, of course, word came that Pastor John would be accepting a position as the new ministerial director. And I couldn't leave Calimesa right before Pastor John announces that he's taking a new position. And so I asked the conference to wait and maybe wait some more. And they totally understood. They've needed a new youth director for almost a year now. I know that's a big need, but they also understand how important it is to take care of Calimesa. And so I kept asking to wait, and they said, absolutely. And then I said, well, could I stay up until Thanksgiving so I can be there for John's final 6 weeks, and then even nearly the 2 months after that? Can we wait that long? They said, of course. And so I accepted the position. And I will tell you that I am very excited for the new opportunity. And I'm so excited for my future with Paige. But I know this is difficult timing for Calimesa. But if there is one thing that Calimesa has taught me, it's that, while it may not seem like it, so often the best is yet to come. And that as life unfolds, we often see God's perfect timing all along. And I deeply hope that's what we see here as well. And due to our unique circumstances, our president, Sandy Roberts, felt it would be good to be present with the Calimesa Church today and speak with us. And I know that you are going straight from here to annual council in Maryland to the airport, but I'm grateful you're here. And so I'm going to invite you up to speak.
Thank you, Aren. I did want to come personally today and speak with you as a congregation because I know this is tough. Saying goodbye to John and now hearing that Aren is going to be joining us in our conference as our new youth director. You know, we have had a lot of transitions in our conference office since our session in October. 6 retirements of department directors, leaders who had been there for decades. And it was also an opportunity for us to begin to revision what we could do to best minister to the 176 churches that we have here in Southeastern, and how we could revision the role of the ministerial department, of the youth department, and bring some new focus to it. We went through a very prayerful process with our officer team, all 6 of us, including our vice presidents, and looked at what we needed in the way of skill sets and the priorities that we felt like were important for our conference. We wanted to stay within the conference, and we wanted to have people come into the office that are fresh out of pastoring, that bring that reality of what it's like to be in the local church. We looked at all 200 pastors all over our conference territory for both positions. It was 2 different sessions, 2 different weeks actually, that we looked at the 2 positions. And we did the ministerial first. There was an absolute clear consensus that John was the person. Didn't take us long to get there. He'd already been working with our pastors, mentoring them through the journey process in other ways. When we got to the youth department, quickly Aren was the name that everyone said, it's got to be Aren. Already with the youth pastors and youth leaders all over our conference territory had emerged as a leader of them. Plus, we wanted to keep him here in Southeastern California Conference, knowing what was going to be happening eventually here anyway. But then we talked about you as Calimesa Church, very concerned about the impact that this would have on you. Your church is a really healthy church, a vibrant church that anchors so much in our conference. And we love you. But I know having 2 pastors leave in close timing here is hard. As pastors, we grow to love you. You wiggle your way into our hearts. We sign up for lives of transition, but it is always hard to leave a congregation, and it's hard for you. We grieve together through these times. But I wanted to come today just to assure you that I'm going to be present with your church over the next few weeks and months as we look for a new senior pastor, as we look for a new youth pastor. We started the search process already. Your board had selected a search committee, and we met for the first time this past Tuesday night. We selected a chair from the group, and that's Kathy McMillan. I'm going to invite her up in a few minutes. I met with the pastoral team and offered to them support in the youth ministry area, whatever that best looks like for you all as Aren makes this transition until we find a new youth pastor for you. And they suggested the best thing would be an interim. The good thing is that as the youth director, Aren will help us make that decision on who your interims will be. So he will help us with that. And we will journey with you prayerfully in trying to find two exceptional pastors moving into the future to work alongside those that you currently have in place, the four that you have. And we appreciate Ken Curtis being willing to step in as the interim lead pastor. But I'm personally going to work with these processes. You know, this church was the first place that I ever participated in a search committee. I had just been elected conference secretary, and you were in need of a senior pastor. And I had the privilege of kind of learning with you how these processes work. And that was when we brought Chris Oberg here. And then I also personally worked with your search committee when we brought John here. And I look forward to investing my time with you over the coming weeks and months and making sure that we have good pastors for you moving forward as well. We will continue to pray and continue to look forward to how God will work in this congregation. We want pastors serving our entire territory that come out of good, healthy churches, and you all have been so supportive of your pastors. Pastors love coming here. You have a great, great reputation, not just in Southeastern, but around North America Division. And you are so generous and caring. And I know that we will be able to find some pastors that will really just love you back and be exceptional for you once again. So thank you for being who you are, and thank you for the journey that we've kind of forced you into here in the next few weeks. But I invite you to pray with us very intentionally that God is already preparing the pastors that will take John and Aren's place. So I'm going to invite Kathy up now, who, again, I'll be working closely with as the chair of the search committee, and she'll be talking to you about how you can participate and share your voice in this process.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for being here. This is a hard day. But I would like to introduce to you the members of the search committee. So if you are here today, would you please stand? Brielle Binney, Stephanie Church, Maggie Cotton, Dan Jung, Nick Levitarov, Liberty Miller, Bob Soderblom, Arwen Wild, and the pastoral staff. So would you please stand? These are people to whom you can give information and ideas, and we are asking that you do that by using the form. Thank you all. It is important that we get names on this form so that we can have a little more information than just a name that's thrown out. We will be meeting again in about a month, taking an opportunity for you all to be able to give us names and ideas, and then we'll move forward. You'll see there's several other ways you can give us input as well. So we trust that as God has been leading in John's and Aren's life, that he is also working in someone else's life or other people's lives, and that we will continue on with wonderful pastors. Thank you.
Many of you may be aware of what's been happening in Sandy's life recently with the sudden loss of her sister, and it just means a lot for you to be here, and we're praying for you and your family. I would like to close this morning by sharing something from this week. You know, being a pastor is a very interesting profession. It's been said before that pastors are simply honored guests in a community. We're invited to come, we stay 3, 5, maybe 20 years, and then we're invited to go somewhere else, and a new honored guest is welcomed into the family. But during that time, we fall in love with the family, as if it's our very own. On Thursday, the fire broke out in Calimesa in the early afternoon. It held this very dark haze over the church, and we knew the building wasn't in danger, but we didn't know the status of people in Calimesa. And the first one to send a message was Pastor John. He texted our pastor group chat and he said, are people evacuating? Does anybody need help? Pastor Isaac and Pastor Viana began calling people. Pastor Ken contacted the city to let them know our church was available as a help center if needed. We then met in the fireside room to prepare it just in case. We started setting up chairs. Pastor Isaac's family began vacuuming and cleaning it up. Pastor Viana was asking if we needed blankets or food. And while they didn't end up needing our church, we were ready in case they did. And I thought about it. You know, Ken is from Riverside. Viana's from San Diego. I'm from Sacramento. Isaac grew up in some place called Georgia. And I don't think any of us even knew a place called Calimesa existed before coming here. But timing we didn't control brought us here. And now we would do anything for this family, as I'm sure any future pastors will as well. And so it was a reminder to me that while I may not always be able to plan everything in my life as I think I can trust in God's timing as good timing and know that the story, my story, your story, our story, is still being written. And so it reminds me of the well-spoken words of a very wise man. And that is that God is good all the time. And all the time, God is good. Great is your faithfulness. Thank you for how you have provided before, how you are providing now, and how you will provide going forward in good timing. We pray this in Jesus' name.